Support for Connecticut East this week comes from SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is offering a $3,500 sign-on bonus for licensed clinicians. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org. And Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling, here to help individuals and families affected by gambling-related harm. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit our website at ccpg.org. He's a Vietnam veteran and author of 3 books about the men and women of the U.S. military. Ron Farina launches the last book in his trilogy, and we were there at the book launch earlier this year. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. For our Christmas and holiday edition, we thought we'd do something a little different this year. Although it is a time for celebration for many, it's also a time for reflection for those who have lost loved ones and those close to them. In October this year, Connecticut East This Week went to a book launch of local author and Vietnam veteran Ron Farina. Ron was featured on the podcast in 2023 when we spoke to him about his trilogy of books about the men and women of the US military. And in October this year, he launched the last book in that trilogy, Sacrifice, the final chapter. I grabbed a quick interview with Ron at the launch event, which was at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Rocky Hill, which you'll hear in just a moment, followed by Ron reading a few extracts and stories from Sacrifice, the final chapter. Ron, the day has come. The final chapter in the trilogy is out, Sacrifice. How are you feeling at this book event?
So many mixed emotions, elation, sadness, but I think more than anything, to me, it's become a celebration and a validation because just about every individual who is in the book is actually here, which for an author is probably the greatest compliment that I think you can get as a writer, to have the people that you wrote about feel strong enough about the writing to actually attend the book launch, almost every one of them.
Of course, also representation from the country of Belgium. Unfortunately, the Duke was unable to attend, but his aide, Belgian Army Colonel Roger Howson, is here. Roger was very much part of this whole process with you. Just talk to us briefly about that.
The process started with my original writing mentor, Mary Collins, who has a brother who is an historian at Georgetown University who's great friends with the Duke of Belgium. Duke of Belgium, to give back to America, does a lot with his foundation in terms of publications. He visited Bethesda in the early days of our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan and saw wounded soldiers, but also took note of the caregivers to the disabled soldiers and didn't think that they were getting enough attention. And he wanted a book written about the caregivers to disabled veterans. Contracted me to write that book. In the process, he enjoyed the writing so much, and I wanted to do more of the writing about these people, that we decided upon a trilogy. The second book, Out of the Shadows, Voices of American Women Soldiers, about the 9 wounded women soldiers who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, representative of the thousands of women who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then we thought, full circle, let's do the third and final book about the families of fallen soldiers and the individuals that were actually lost as well.
As we say, the 3 books finally here. What happens next for Ron Farina? Have you got any more projects, and will they be military related after?
I have a 4th book that's out that's called At the Altar of the Past, which is a love story, totally unrelated to these 3 books. But when you turn a manuscript into a publisher, probably the second question is, so do you have anything else? As it so happens, I do have something else. The 5th book that I am working on now is about an Afghan interpreter, Abdul Nazari, who will be here today. And Abdul was the interpreter to Captain Andrew Peterson Keel, whose mother is here, Captain was killed in a battle. Abdul was standing next to the captain during that battle. And Abdul was wounded on 2 separate occasions serving America with the Special Forces. Never received any recognition for that. So today, he's here. He'll be recognized. And that book about him, his entire life story from the time he was an infant to his escape to America, will be out probably about October next year.
Well, Ron, it's been great talking to you. We've had you on the podcast, of course, before talking about these books. We're so pleased that we were invited back to be part of this historic moment. Congratulations on these 3 books and obviously the other books that you're continuing to write. And thanks for talking to us.
You're so welcome, Brian. It's always a pleasure to see you. I want to start off with a story about a bond between a father and his daughter, an unusual bond, one that surprised me. This is from book 1 in Sacrifice, the final chapter. It's Rachel Hugo and her father. Rachel was lost to us in Iraq on October 5th in 2007. But Rachel grew up close friends with rifles, hunting side by side with her father and uncles most weekends during hunting season. And the first time she had game in sight, enough for a meal, or the wild game jerky that Kermit Hugo, his father, had taught him to make. She hesitated to pull the trigger. The rabbit, nibbling on woodland aster, hearing movement, darted off and disappeared into the underbrush. But Rachel became a good hunter. She had good aim and a steady hand. On another hunt, on another cold fall morning, their breath, plumes of steam against the morning chill. Rachel, Kermit, and the hunting dogs walked into the woods in search of small game. Frost collected on the toes of their boots, and one of the dogs stopped and chewed at a ball of ice knotted between its toes. Father and daughter waded close to a narrow. Father and daughter waded close, their shoulders brushing the worn pathway they saw, most likely a rabbit run, a ribbon in the frost-covered grass. Kermit silently nodded to Rachel. Move downwind. The dogs picked up the scent, and a rabbit, alarmed, raised up, froze like a statue, its nose quivering, searching the air, then ran towards Rachel. Kermit yelled, "Here it comes!" Rachel raised her rifle. She remembered what she'd been taught. Squeeze, don't pull. Keep the rifle steady, smooth motion. Breathe, Rachel. Exhale slowly. Don't pull. You'll make the rifle jerk. Miss high. Boom! The crows, jolted by the blast of the Winchester, leapt from the treetops, cawing angrily, chastising the 2 hunters. The rabbit jerked awkwardly, spun, then flopped on its side. The dogs charged toward the fresh kill, bellowing and howling, and they circled the rabbit, continuing their wild celebration. Kermit caught up with Rachel, called the dogs off. Well trained, they surged together, milling and pushing their way toward the rabbit, sniffing and whining, their bloodlust unsatisfied. Kermit looked at the rabbit. Hey, nice shot, Rach. You got him. 12-year-old Rachel beamed, did a little dance, stomped her feet, fist pumped with her free hand. Yes, yes, Dad, I got him. I popped him. You did, Kermit shouted, celebrating almost exuberantly as his young daughter. Hell of a shot, Rach. Look again, clean headshot. None of the meat is spoiled. That's a great shot. Got him now. He's your kill. She found a clean patch of grass to gut the rabbit, careful to keep the animal clear of dirt and mud, then slit open the belly, scooping out the innards, taking care not to burst the bladder or bowel or intestine. And she wiped the bloody knife in the still frosty grass, then rubbed her hands through a cleaner patch, the frost melting against her warm flesh, cleaning the blood away as she rubbed her palms and fingers together. Over the years, father, daughter, dogs, and occasional uncle became a team. Whatever they shot, they ate. Squirrel stew, roasted rabbit, occasional game birds too. They hunted together every season until Rachel deployed. Home on leave, before deploying back to Iraq, She slipped the challenge coin into her father's hands. "Keep this safe for me until I come home." They made plans to hunt together when she got back. "I'll be home in time to catch part of the opening hunting season," she said. Her last words to her father. From Book 3, Misty Herrera and her sister, Nicole G. In Kabul, Afghanistan, late summer heat seared the runways and the tarmac and the taxiways of Hamid Karzai Airport. Smoke rose from an explosion outside of the airport's Abbey Gate, where thousands of people trying to flee a Taliban takeover waited. 11 American Marines, an American soldier and an American Navy corpsman lay dead. The 2 decades-old war was ending. America was leaving. Days earlier, the photo of a young woman splashed across news outlets around the world. Marine Sergeant Nicole G., part of the American evacuation team in country since mid-August, cradled a baby in her arms, and the caption, you may have seen it, "I love my job." In Lincoln, California, Misty, Nicole's older sister, caught news of the blast. Hundreds injured, almost 100 killed, 13 American military among the dead. Friends, family texted, called, asked if Misty had seen the news. Is Nicole okay? Weeks earlier, Nicole had sent a text to Misty. I've got orders to deploy to Afghanistan, if that's what you can label a text. I've got a bunch of people messaging me about that pic. They want to know, is that really your sister? I mean, that pic, it's literally everywhere across the globe, Misty wrote in her text. Dude, that pic is going down in history, Nicole messaged back. Misty typed a reply. I know. Hey, your husband is flying into California tonight. He has some extra leave. He's staying with his mom and brother at the casino hotel. I'll see them tomorrow. And she hit send. That was it. That was the last time the two sisters connected. The next morning, Misty was left to wonder if her sister was among the dead or the wounded. So was the rest of the family and Nicole's husband, Marine Sergeant Jared G. Misty called him. What do we do now? Misty asked. Wait. I've already been notified. I'd already have been notified if something happened to Nicole, Jared said. I'll come to your house. What ifs and yeah buts filled the hours. Misty is bombarded with text. Jared showed up, his mother too. The text chain grew throughout the day. Everyone had questions. Everyone wanted to reassure the other that Nicole had to be okay. She's just one of 2,000 Marines and soldiers. Navy too. Can't be her. We'd know by now if it was. She's okay. It's Nicole. Nothing ever happens to her. The world was about to throw all its cruelty at her. Jared, his face swollen, his eyes red, stood in front of her. She panned from Jared's chest up to his face and saw the pain in his eyes. He waited, knows that Misty understands what he's about to tell her. So hard. He cleared his throat, began to speak. Nicole was killed, he said, his voice bloated with grief. The small pieces of hope Misty had clung to disappeared on the downbeat of each word. She tried to speak, to answer Jared, but her voice failed, her throat too constricted. Jared wrapped his arms around Misty and held her, and they sat, circled on the floor of the new house, furniture not yet fully arranged. They embraced and cried, tried to buffer one another from the pain, told each other stories about Nicole. So Helen Kaiser Peterson and her son, Andrew. September 2008, the day, night before Andrew's very first deployment. Helen flew out to meet him, landed at Bergstrom Airport in Austin. While she filled out paperwork for a rental car, she overheard fragments of conversation. A young couple. Helen sized him up. He looks military. Young, though. Wife. I guess that's his wife. She's young, too. Still teenagers, if I had to take a guess. They look like newlyweds, but all their belongings are in an army duffel in a green plastic bag. Oh my. "Hi," she said, pushing her hand forward. "Are you kids okay? You look lost." "Well, we've got to get to Fort Hood, ma'am. I'm going to be stationed there," the boy said. "Where are you two from?" "Idaho, ma'am." "Well, Idaho, I'm going that way. I'm going to meet my son. Let me drive the two of you," Helen said. "Well, ma'am, that would sure help, but we don't want to put you out." "Stop. You're not, you won't. I'm going that way in an empty car. I guess it's," "You guess nothing. It's decided," Helen said. "Follow me. We can put all of the stuff in the trunk," Helen said, gesturing toward her suitcase, the duffel, and a hefty double-ply. "Yes, ma'am. We'll take the ride." "Grateful, ma'am, but let me handle your suitcase." She pulled the rental into a parking lot of a La Quinta Inn. In the lobby, Helen hugged her son Andrew, off-duty in civvies, T-shirt tied across his chest, shorts and flip-flops. Idaho, his eyes suddenly wide open, mouth agape, looked at Andrew, recognizing not just another soldier, but by Andrew's appearance, he moved with ease. "Relax, soldier," Andrew said, carrying the conversation, putting the young soldier and even his younger wife at ease. "We're both off duty here. My mother tells me you're headed to Fort Hood." "Yes, I am, sir. AIT, sir." "Well, it's good to meet you, soldier. Good luck." "Thank you, sir." They rode the elevator together. The young couple, their rooms across the hall from Andrew, said their goodnights. Inside his room, Andrew and Helen settled. "Are you all set?" Helen asked, looking at Andrew's duffel and backpack. I'm all set, Mom." "Well, what about the car? You're going to be gone for a year. Have you decided what to do with it?" "I think I know what to do with the car," Andrew said. "What?" "Well, if I'm right about this kid, you'll see. Why don't you get them? Tell them I want to see him." Helen knocked on the door. Idaho looked surprised to see her standing there. "My son wants to see you," she said. Idaho followed her through the door. His young wife, sheepish, followed the two of them. Inside the room, Helen stepped away, and the kids, worried whispers, mumbled to each other. Helen, amused, hid her smile. Andrew pulled the young soldier aside. "I like your attitude, soldier," he said, "so listen up. I'll be on deployment for the next year, and I got a car. I need to do something with. So I'd like to give it to you," Andrew said. "My car." He said, when Idaho looked up, surprised. "For real, sir? A car?" "For real, soldier. I'll sign it over to you now." The next morning, Andrew left on his first deployment. A year later, he came back and would deploy again and again, until sadly, he didn't come home. I've kept here long enough. Certainly let me end, but I want to end with a message. I think it may be a little redundant, but I'm going to say it anyway. Read every page of Sacrifice, the final chapter. Learn the stories. Tell the stories to others. Learn. Learn about a CAO, a casualty assistance officer. Learn about notification teams. Marine Corps and the Navy, we have our own jargon. We call it a CACO. Learn about them too. Learn about men like Lieutenant Mark Oz. Learn about men and women like Leanne and Ed Trotting Wolf. Let's say their names. You don't have to say them with me. But I want to reinforce the names once more in the hope that you'll remember them. And I say this because I have stood in front of dozens of audiences and spoke about veterans and their families, and spoke about war, and spoke about my own detest for war. And I've always asked one question when I start. I say, who knows the name Nicole G? And invariably, only one or two hands go up. Nicole G was one of the Marines killed at Abbey Gate. We need to know their names. We need to know all their names. And we need to tell others their names. Kermit Hugo and his daughter Rachel, Misty Herrera and her sister Nicole, and people like Kelsey, wounded with her. Andrew, Andrew Peterson Keel, known to everybody as Captain PK, Helen and Bob Kaiser's son. Colleen Whipple and Rex Shad, Pat and Michael Perry, and their son Brian Bill. Tell their stories, remember their name, because everyone needs to know.
And if you want to get hold of a copy of Sacrifice, the Final Chapter, or Ron's other books in the trilogy, you can do so on Amazon by searching his name, Ron Farina, and his books can also be obtained from most good bookstores. Connecticut East This Week is made possible by
SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is looking for licensed clinicians and is offering the top benefits packages in the state. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org.
The Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling is a nonprofit organization which, through advocacy, prevention, and education, is here to support individuals and families who are impacted by problem gambling. Our helpline, 1-888-789-7777, is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have live chat and tech support through our website, www.ccpg.org.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
When I met both of them, it was like my missing pieces were found. Like it was just like an instant, these are my kids. If you're considering adopting a teen, just do it. Kids need families. I don't care the age, everybody deserves a family.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. A message brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. The former commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, Admiral Carl Schultz, has admitted in a recent interview with the news organization CNN that he deliberately withheld the agency's secret report called Operation Fouled Anchor from Congress and the public that CNN unearthed last year. That report detailed allegations of sexual assault and misconduct at the Coast Guard Academy based in New London, Connecticut, from the late 80s to the early 2000s. Christine Dunn is the managing partner of law firm Sanford, Heisler, Sharp, McKnight, who are representing 25 Coast Guard victims, and says his comments just add weight to their legal challenge.
He has said that his reason for withholding it is because he thought that if he released it to Congress, they would leak the victims' names. I don't think that's a very compelling argument. There are all kinds of sensitive congressional inquiries, and there are ways to protect victims' names. If anything, I think he really did the victims a disservice and caused them more harm by withholding it.
Dunn says Schultz's decision to withhold the report was a gross miscalculation by him.
I can't tell you how many of my clients I've spoken to who have said that it really opened up the wounds to have to relive this during the Operation Fouled Anchor investigation. But what was really devastating to them is that nothing came of it. They opened up these wounds, they relived their trauma, and then nothing happened. And so it was very harmful to them that he withheld this information.
Schultz also told CNN he withheld the report because he feared that Congress and lawmakers would blow it out of proportion and make political capital out of the situation. Connecticut East This Week reached out for comment from the U.S. Coast Guard Public Affairs Department about Schultz's comments, but the agency did not respond directly to that particular question. Connecticut's Attorney General William Tong has been elected to serve as president-elect of the National Association of Attorneys General after a unanimous vote by its members. The organization is a non-partisan national forum that provides expertise and guidance to the nation's attorneys general. Tong says his new position will allow him to help the wider attorneys general community.
So it means I'll have a front and center role in holding the community of attorneys general together. We do so much work together, our work on the opioid and addiction crisis, our investigation and lawsuit against Meta, Instagram, Facebook, our investigation of TikTok. We're maybe the last public institution in which Democrats and Republicans work together seamlessly in a lot of ways. We've been doing so for a very long time, delivering for the people of our states.
Tong says his job and that of his colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, is more essential than ever, especially living in polarizing times and political change.
Political influences and polarization have infected our community and have impacted our ability to do our work. But by and large, we are still very functional. We still respect each other. We work together with each other closely. They are my colleagues, and I hope and believe that they respect me as much as I respect them. That's why this job is so important. In this moment, it is my duty and responsibility to use this institution, all of us, to try to hold our union together.
Tong will be one of 4 leaders at the NAAG, which comprises 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, as expected to succeed as overall president in a year's time in 2025. A new report finds Connecticut's mobile crisis intervention services are improving. Edwin J. Vieira from the Connecticut News Service has this report.
The Child Health and Development Institute report finds more than 11,000 calls for care were made, helping more than 8,400 kids, but this is a 7% decline from last year. The report finds call volumes were lowest in 2021 because of the pandemic. Kayla Terrio with the Child Health and Development Institute says this issue is being corrected.
We're definitely working with our providers and schools and other referrers in the state to make sure that children are having access to the service, because really the goal of the service is to be a service that anyone can access and that can meet children and families where they're at.
Although the service runs smoothly, it's taken time to reach this point. She says it's done better after a 2009 redesign that included more collaboration between the state, CHDI, and their provider network. Data-driven solutions have become a key measure of how to sustain the high level of service. Based on this year's data, Terrio says things look good, but she wants to reach out to communities which don't often use mobile crisis services. I'm Edwin J. Vieira.
And Michael J. O'Connor, the former vice president of Dominion Energy's Millstone Nuclear Power Station base in Waterford, Connecticut, has become the new executive director of the Connecticut Port Authority. The announcement came after a lengthy search during a regular meeting of the CPA's board members recently. O'Connor spoke briefly to board members during the virtual Zoom meeting, thanking them for their support. O'Connor retired recently from his previous role at Millstone after more than 30 years at the power station, holding a variety of roles during his tenure there. One of O'Connor's first priorities will be to hire a maritime development manager following the recent resignation of Eric Dussault after 6 months at the agency. O'Connor also joins the agency as it continues to deal with fallout over its state pier project in the city of New London that has cost over $300 million and recently was reported to have structural problems with the south wall of the pier, which was being affected by alleged substandard soil fill. He becomes the authority's 4th person to hold the title of executive director in the CPA's 8-year history. And very finally, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of our listeners. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.